Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And today we are talking about Only Murders in the Building, a Hulu original that is, good Lord, just delightful.
Oh, and original.
And original, so fun.
Legitimately original.
I was going to call them like a ragtag group, but considering where they live and who they are, they're not so much tags on rags as they are like sticker price.
Yeah.
Group of unlikely friends who bond over a true crime podcast, and first somebody else's and then their own. And it's so fun.
It's so like meta and not all at the same time. And oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I will be watching the entire season.
Oh, yeah.
I only made it a few episodes in.
Yeah. Watching with my husband.
That's why I had to stop too.
I mean, and I say that with such contempt. I like watching it with him.
But I know you want to binge it.
I do. I want to watch the rest of it. And he's like, one. And I'm like,
But.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But. Oh, speaking of but. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes. Happy Thanksgiving.
Today is the day. If you celebrate, if you're in the U.S. and you're celebrating Thanksgiving today, hope you're having a wonderful one.
Yes.
We're very glad that it's here, and because that means a little bit of a break from the normal, like, rush of school routine.
Oh, yes.
Different things. So it's a very nice. And don't forget that while you're having your holiday meal, you don't want to talk about politics. Ooh. So, that's no fun. Ask about hometown crime instead.
Yes.
And get the good stories and send them to us.
Yes, because we're doing a thing.
Yes. Our holiday episode, our Christmas week adjacent episode, whenever that is falling on December 23rd, I think, this year.
Ooh.
So it's really close to Christmas. We always do a hometown crime, and that's super fun. And I have these little fun, they look like gnomes, but really they're homicidal maniacs. We learned that last time.
Hiding on your tree.
That's right. And, you want one, so send it in. Send it to killerfunpodcast@gmail.com or a DM on any of the socials.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Send them in. Just write it out a little bit, a paragraph or two about it doesn't have to be murder. Can be murder if you'd like it to be. But it can also be stupid criminals or the weird thing that happened to you that was crime adjacent when you were a kid or whatever.
I mean, white collar crime. It could be like all kinds of interesting sort of like crimey
Did you have a neighbor who you found out was like embezzling money from the mob?
Yeah.
Or anybody, but the mob would be interesting.
The mob would be interesting.
Because that's a perilous situation.
I may have a new thing to go investigate.
Oh, there you go.
You've piqued a memory.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ooh, fun.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, good. Glad to help. All right. Let's talk about the cast for Only Murders in the Building. I'm only going to talk about the top three because there's so much to say
about these three.
I mean, and I'm not even going to do them justice hardly. But Steve Martin plays Charles Hayden Savage, from Sonny and Cher's Comedy Hour to The Jerk to Roxanne to SNL to Father of the Bride. He is an unmatched comic genius. He writes, he acts,
bluegrass.
Plays bluegrass.
His band is amazing.
Super charming. I can't think of a single scandal he's ever been involved in.
No.
Like ever. And he's been around since the early 70s in the public eye. I mean, he's unmatched except maybe by his very favorite partner that he works with, Martin Short, who plays Oliver Putnam. And, from Three Amigos, he had his very own brief television show, The Martin Short Show, that only aired for 3 episodes. I vaguely remember when it was on and being disappointed that it got canceled so quickly, though I can't remember anything that happened in it. Countless special appearances on dozens of shows. He had a really endearing run as the voice of the Cat in the Hat on PBS, and he's always the perfect frenemy to Steve Martin.
Of course. Well, Father of the Bride, perfect. Mm-hmm. And they have a live show that they did a tour with.
Okay.
And it was on TV or on streaming somewhere. I don't know. I can't remember where. We'll have to post that later because I can't remember where it was. But it was a fantastic live variety show with the two of them. And in fact, there was a whole section where Steve Martin came out and did a little bit of bluegrass and everything. And I mean, it's a whole thing, and it was absolutely delightful. So when you brought this show up to me, I didn't know about this.
Yeah, I don't know how you didn't know about this.
I don't know how I didn't know about this either. But when you said it, all of a sudden I was like,
I have to watch this.
I've got to see this. Yeah.
And then, of course, we have Selena Gomez, who seems like a very unlikely partner for these two, which is why it makes so much sense and why it's so much fun. Mabel Mora is the character. She started as a kid regular on Barney.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then became a household name with her leading role in Disney's Wizards of Waverly Place, which she got from a nationwide casting call.
I mean, that's pretty
that's
phenomenal.
I mean, talk about like lottery.
Yeah, like that's
winning.
just a cattle call.
And she must have really stood out because she's amazing. And, she's got this, she grew out of that into more mature acting roles and a successful career as a musician. And I mean, top 10 hits, top 10 albums.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and she's not yet 30.
Oh my gosh, she's so young.
I know. 1992.
Oh my gosh. I mean, she's just so young to be that good.
I know.
And to have that much of a resume.
Uh-huh. Oh, well, she's been working like nonstop. She didn't fall into the child star.
That's true.
Conundrum. She seemed to be able to work her way through growing up and doing different things. And
yeah.
It helps that she was talented as well as just a cute kid. Sometimes they're only successful because they're cute, and then they get less cute when they hit puberty, and then they have this existential crisis about...
Yeah, I mean, actually, we feel like it's a stereotype that this is what happens, but it's actually relatively few compared to the vast majority of kids who are in the business who just do it as a kid and then go on to do
they have different interests.
Right, they just go on to do other things. That was cool. I was a kid. I did this thing. But, like basically the entire cast of Sandlot.
Yeah, they just grew up and did other things.
They just did other things. But when a child actor is, often exploited.
Yes.
Right? They get so big. Like they're so big that it's like a whole nother thing. Then you end up with a Free Britney campaign.
Yes.
So.
Yes, or people wonder why Macaulay Culkin got weird.
Yeah.
He
was talented.
And I say he got weird, and he is weird, but he's like delightfully, endearingly weird.
Oh yeah, he's just eccentric. He was talented and cute, but also became such a giant success and had a family who was interested in that kind of success. Right. And I think that was a little much because his brothers are really good actors also.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
So
Kieran Culkin is
amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's talent in that family and skill, but I mean, being a kid and having like Home Alone, that's just like a skyrocket to success. That is like unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of Home Alone, we'll go ahead and talk about it now. We're going to do that next time.
It's on our brains. That's why we're talking about it. Yes. Home Alone. Watch it again with us.
We're going to watch it. I believe it's on Disney Plus, and we'll talk about that again at the end. But we'll remind you at the end. But for next time, join us. Home Alone. All right. I'm going to recap this bad boy. A trio of true crime fans who live in some swanky New York apartment building bond over a shared love of an investigation reporting podcast and a murder in their own building. Ooh. We know from the opening scene that not everything is as it seems, but really it all starts with three lonely people. Charles is a washed-up actor famous for playing a detective and pretty much nothing else. Oliver was once a major player in the New York theater scene, and now he's struggling not only financially, but with a desire for notoriety and influence that he's unable to obtain. And Mabel is quiet, not famous, living in somebody else's apartment that's badly in need of renovation, and keeping some pretty heady secrets.
Oh, yeah. She's got some stuff.
Oh, yes. In fact, all three are keeping secrets. But sometimes, as Charles said, it's easier to figure out someone else's secret than it is to deal with your own.
That was a fantastic line.
Yes.
I loved that line.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, ooh, it's so simple, but so like poignant and so like there's layers. Yeah.
Like an onion.
Like an onion.
That they peel on a good true crime podcast.
Exactly. Layers. They're so funny because they're just so like, they're just so New York creative. In their like, oh, I'm sure, peel your layers, peel your onion for us. Like here's some of our layers. Like it's just such a, I don't know, it's just delightful.
It's so like stereotypical, and they feel like they're being very unique and intelligent and observant, and they're saying exactly the same stuff that everybody says.
Yes.
In television, at least. I don't know if they actually say all of these things, but they're the tropes that you see of the New York creatives. And this is the thing. These are the things that they say.
And they pull it off, though. They pull off the idea that they don't realize that they're common in saying it. You know what I mean?
They're not unique. They're not special in having this insight. It's not insight. It's.
I mean, Shrek said it, so.
Exactly. Exactly. So it was really well received, maybe even loved by both critics and audiences.
As it should be.
I mean, for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%
oh my gosh.
on Rotten Tomatoes from critics.
Has that ever happened?
I mean, it rarely.
I mean, rarely, right?
So rarely.
Jeez.
So rarely. And then the audience score is 94%. And, there's always some haters.
There's always going to be
There's going to be somebody who says, well, I don't like Selena Gomez, or Martin Short isn't as funny as he thinks he is. Like, yes, he is. He's always
funny.
And he's always funny. And he's like super, super nice. My husband asked for his autobiography on an audiobook for Christmas a few years back when he was doing the commuting thing. And so he had some time, and he would ask for them on CD for reasons.
Okay.
There's reasons. I'm not going to go into them. But he'd ask for them on CD when he had asked for an audiobook, and Martin Short reads it himself.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's so just like sweet and endearing, and he just loved his wife so much. Aww. And it was just, he's like legitimately just a nice guy. And I'm like, oh, I love that.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So Alex Hudson of Exclaim, it's got all the fun of crime without any of the real life exploitation. Ooh. Which I appreciate.
Wow.
We'll talk a little more about some of that later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Austin Burke of Flick Fan Nation said Only Murders in the Building is an effective crime series, but it goes beyond that with beautifully balancing heart with some classic gags. This trio is one for the ages.
Aww.
I was like, yes.
That's great.
Yes. And Vulture liked it. Catherine Van Arendonk, who she frequently writes the kind of reviews for Vulture that we are interested in. It's not perfect, even though it's 100% fresh, but it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were to lay it out point by point and try to pin it all to a big wall, you'd quickly discover that very little about Only Murders makes much sense. It's true for the show's internal mechanics, and it's also true for the meta-level concept of the show. But there's a rollicking quality to the whole thing, a playful energy that seems into everything from the set designs to the casting to the chemistry between longtime creative partners Martin and Short. Only Murders wants its viewer to really feel for its characters, but to not only feel for its characters, but to treat all their surrounding true crime paraphernalia like an elaborate, almost clownish Pink Panther style set piece. Yeah. It was like,
that's
if you examine it really closely from start to finish, which of course they had 8 episodes of the 10 to review, which is quite a lot. Here's watch 80% of it and then tell us what you think.
Makes sense.
Which is fine.
Yeah,
whatever.
because, I mean, some of that, obviously, we haven't gotten that far. So
right.
maybe I don't see how some of the things don't make sense yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
but...
I mean, I think we watched the 5th episode last night. Mm-hmm. And my husband said, oh, yeah, it's going off the rails a little bit. I'm like, no, it's not. It's perfect. It's absolutely ridiculous in a perfect way. And I'm just like, maybe he just doesn't understand.
That's so funny.
It wouldn't be the first time.
No.
I have to explain memes to him on a regular basis. I love him. I have to explain the memes. Why is this funny? I don't understand why this is funny.
That surprises me.
Because he's so funny.
Because he's like unusually funny.
Yes.
And witty.
Yes.
And so that's interesting.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, that's just, I'm going to ponder that for a while.
Well, while you ponder that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Is It True? Psychology Break and Real Life.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, NSA, we promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity or something I never thought of.
Is it true? So the very thirst thing.
Thirst? Thrice thing?
No. The very first thing we see is police figures in black with ESU emblazoned on them, and they are forcefully entering an apartment. This is a thing we're not going to know about until I think the end of the series, or until the end of the season. I don't know about the series. There's going to be a season 2. Anyway.
I don't know.
ESU.
Yes.
Yeah, the Emergency Service Unit is indeed a thing.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing, and the NYPD is credited with establishing the concept of a police emergency squad. Mm-hmm. And so it would make sense that they would be in there. ESU would be a common acronym that you would be able to see on people in flak gear as a SWAT team, identifying them as police.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have that here.
No.
We don't have an ESU.
No, I don't know what it would be, but it would be something else.
Something else.
If you saw it, you would know it.
That's true.
Yeah.
True.
The Arconia.
Yeah, okay, talk about this. Talk about this.
Okay, it's both true and false.
Okay, of course. That's how these things are.
Right, exactly. But it's unusual in that it has this large interior courtyard.
Yes, amazing.
And an iron gate and its own driveway. The show was entirely shot in New York City, but the Arconia itself is not a real building. Mm-hmm. It's actually the Belnord.
Okay.
Is the facade and the
exterior shots.
The exterior shots of this. And
but this thing exists. It is apartments?
Yes.
Or condos?
Yes, they're condos.
Okay.
And it does exist. It is a block-long building, and it has huge sets of amenities, including this lush garden in the center is real, and a covered porch for cars to drop off and pick up passengers.
I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, it is incredible. Now, the interior shots are quite different than what you would see in the Belnord, because, of course, those are done, on soundstage somewhere. It's very expensive.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, like the lowest priced active listing in September of 2021. God, it's 2021.
Yeah.
Sorry. I still feel like we're living the 2020 life. I feel like my life stopped, and now it's kind of started up again. I'm just finishing 2020, but it's actually 2021. Yeah. Sorry. So in September of 2021, the lowest price active listing was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment.
Okay.
And it was $2.5 million. Yeah. And I mean, that's just to buy it. Now, there are building fees because those grounds don't maintain themselves.
Right.
You know, if you need the super to come fix something, it's not maintaining itself. If the elevator goes out, somebody's got to pay for that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what the condo fee would be for this place. Yeah. But I also could imagine that based on their setup there, it might include a lot.
I think sure it does. It probably includes health, like a gym type of thing. There might be some spa services available. There's probably a media room where you could host people to come over and watch movies or whatever. There's some of that stuff probably going on.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. The highest price listing that was under contract in September of 2021 was a 5-bedroom, 7-bathroom unit, and it was $14.1 million. And it was under contract.
Oh, wow.
I want to go. I'm like, let's win the lottery.
That's amazing.
Live in New York.
Oh.
I'll go live there. If I win the lottery, I can afford a $14 million apartment.
Depending on what kind of lottery you win, absolutely.
That's right.
You could at least get the small one.
That's right.
And that's better. See, more small places in multiple places. Right? Like in multiple cities.
See, and I'm thinking, lots of money. I'm going to do a lot of good with it, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with it.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think real estate would be my first, like, ooh. This is what I'm going to do.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are other locations that are seen but not named that are in the first episode that are actually like real places in New York. So when Steve Martin gets stopped outside of a building on the street, somebody recognizes him as Brazos. That building that they stopped in front of was the Dakota.
Okay.
And it's another really famous Upper West Side apartment building. And it's probably most famous for being the scene of John Lennon's murder.
Oh, yeah.
That's where John Lennon was shot.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then, of course, Broadway. Mabel's walking down the street, Broadway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Charles' opening monologue says that the boondocks are more dangerous than the city.
I was like,
Largely true. Largely true.
But what kind of crime are we including in this?
Okay.
Because I feel like if you're going to add all the types of crime, then the balance shifts.
I don't think so, actually. From the research that I did, it seems like, well, we'll get there. Safe Home Safe, a security company, has an article, Why Urban Living is Safer Than You Think. Most people associate cities with crime, but is largely due to the media painting a blood-soaked picture.
Okay.
So they cite a study that says your risk of death is actually about 22% higher in the most rural counties in America than it is in the urban ones. But it's not necessarily because of crime. It's because hospitals are far away. So when you're looking at rural areas and you have an average of 50 minutes to a medical facility, your chance of death is higher.
Right.
And that if you're looking at like gun wounds, that it's about the same in cities and rural areas. As far as in suburbs, it depends on the proximity to the city, how much crime you're likely to encounter. So an issue in a suburb is that there are fewer people around.
Right.
And so if you get into trouble, there's fewer people to call for help. If you're in the middle of a city and you can yell for help, even if they don't come out and help you, they are more likely to call 911 because they don't want to, you woke them up.
Yeah.
And so they're going to call and report a disturbance. The police are going to come. Cities tend to promote more well-being because they're close to things. It's less of an arduous task to go grocery shopping because you'll go and shop for a day or 2 or 3. And so you're more likely to have fresh food available. You're more likely to walk where you need to go. There's a lot of public transportation, cultural events, things like that. And really, as far as like death goes, cars are one of the most dangerous things. I mean, you're statistically small to die in a car crash.
I know, but it's
still higher than gun deaths or any of that because more people are exposed to it. So the more you have to drive, the more likely you are to get into a car accident, the higher likelihood you're going to have a death from a car accident. So the further you have to commute, the more likelihood that you'll have an issue with it.
Right.
And both suburbs and rural areas tend to have smaller roads or less well-maintained roads.
Okay.
And they tend to be more dangerous. So if they're dark or have a lot of potholes, or it's one lane and you have to switch back and forth between people driving, in directions, people get confused, and it gets better as the area grows.
Right.
They tend to widen roads and repair them and things. But
so death, victimization, like human crime like that, I could see.
Yeah.
But I think once you add petty crime, theft, burglaries, muggings, and these kind of things, I think it's going to tip the other way.
I think it still ends up being pretty close, because
Really?
robberies tend to be higher in suburbs and rural areas, only because when people leave, they're gone for longer. So if somebody's watching a home or an apartment, they watch them for a few days, they know how long they're going to be gone. And so a lot of robberies happen during the day. They don't happen at night.
Right.
Yeah. So you hear a lot about urban crime because it's on the news. It's easy for the news to get footage of.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's not, the statistics don't play out.
Interesting.
That it's either equally safe or slightly safer to live in a city.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Mabel said that 2,000 women make assault reports annually in NYC, and it seems like this might be actually a little low.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other thing, is that she comes back with the opposite perspective about the fact that actually it's far less safe for a woman to live in the city,
right?
Because of the risk of these kinds of things,
right?
So
I don't know where she got that figure,
right?
Because it's difficult to find that kind of figure, particularly for New York, broken down by gender. But the crime index has risen a bit in New York City in the past year. I think mainly because they're coming out of lockdown, and so people are out and about more. So these criminals are out and about more. That the overall crime index rose 22% in May 2021 as opposed to May of 2020, which makes sense because we're still like early in lockdowns. A lot of people weren't going anywhere. It was particularly bad in New York City. So a lot of people weren't like leaving and going and doing stuff. So there was a lot more robberies, a lot more grand larceny, a 20% increase in felony assault. And that was up to almost 2,000 just in May of 2021 alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's across the board. We're seeing that everywhere. I mean, our own county, Bexar County, just released a statement about the rise in crime, and it's become a real problem.
Right.
Post-COVID, as people are coming back into some normal routines, or their routines were shattered.
Right.
So we have so many people who have been forced into financial distress or, job distress, relationship distress across the board. And so it's creating a situation.
Right. So the 2,000 women reporting an assault may have been a little low since there was almost that many assaults overall in just a single month.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oof.
Yeah. But she also mentions that women watch Dateline to avoid being on Dateline.
Yeah.
Which we've kind of talked about this before.
We have talked about this before.
This article from February of 2020 in Vogue by Megan Sharma. This might be the reason why women are obsessed with true crime stories. So I thought it's been a little while since we talked about it. So
it is. And it's totally relevant.
It is totally relevant. So true crime content helps women understand a criminal's mindset and promotes a sense of justice. So if you can understand how a perpetrator is thinking, then you might be able to anticipate their moves and therefore avoid it.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking through these things, then perhaps you can maybe keep yourself a little safer, make yourself less of an easy target.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that women tend to report that when they listen to or watch true crime shows or listen to true crime podcasts that they tend to consciously change their behavior that helps them at least feel safer.
Right.
Whether or not they are.
Include new protective behaviors, whether we think that it's really protective or not. It's like, well, why not? Why not try it,
Right. All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma is not a real podcast.
Okay, so we can't go binge it.
You cannot
All right.
go and listen to Tina Fey talk about some true crime, some dog with a pair of panties in its mouth.
Oh, that was so funny. The whole thing was so funny.
It was so funny. It was so funny to watch them bond over what does she have in her mouth.
Okay, so this was a very interesting thing to me about the show right here.
Okay.
They set it up as if it was playing live.
Right.
Which is very interesting because I think they accomplished a few things. Obviously, practically, it allowed their characters to meet up and bond because they were all at the same place and they all had the same questions, right? The other thing it did was it made it more intergenerational for folks who still kind of watch live TV more than streaming, and so it bridged make the concept of a podcast to a live show.
Right. Even though it wasn't live, it's just like it drops at, 6 p.m.
And so they all wanted to catch
and
it.
Everybody wants to listen to it because they don't want it spoiled for them.
Right. And so, but for those who aren't into podcasts, especially those who are maybe older and haven't gotten into podcasts because it was sort of, they were past
That's
them.
what the kids do.
That's what the kids do. It allows them to get into the show because it's treated like a show.
Right. Yeah.
I thought it was a very unique way to do that.
I agree. I hadn't really considered that, but that is good job.
Good job, directors, showrunners,
that's
creators.
Right. But it may have been based on a number of true crime podcasts. I think we can
There's
say
a lot to choose from.
Well, isn't there though? It's primarily serial in the way that it moves the story forward. S-Town with its unexpected turns. All of the Dateline NBC podcasts are, dealing with this crime and murder. There's one called Mystery Show that's insightful without being preachy, which is how All Is Not Okay seems to be played. And then Murdaugh Murders, which is a real-time sort of investigative podcast. And we've all, listened to those. And you get to a point where they were complaining about pacing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's a real-time investigation. Sometimes nothing happens.
Yeah, like
this is why a lot of shows that I've listened to, the police stop investigating and there's nothing else for the podcaster to go on.
Right. And so
like
it's done.
even if they are doing their own investigation and they're talking to people, there's only so much that they can do without the resources of a police department behind them.
Yeah, right.
There's only so much they can do. And they're like, well, yeah, it's boring. It's a real thing. It's a real happening investigation. It's not something that already has an end.
Yeah, what these people are looking for is more of a historical sort of situation where somebody has finished their whole story and then it all drops.
Well, that's what they want. They want that kind of narrative, but they want the excitement
of something now.
Of this just broke. And there just isn't always a break.
Nope.
And when things break, you might have a bunch of stuff break. And then they're like, well, why didn't you tell me about this weeks ago? Well, because I only release once a week or every other week.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? I have sponsors that I have to release on a schedule.
Yeah.
Speaking of sponsors.
Good timing.
Let's talk about the sponsors for All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. So the Rand Corporation is real and does fund a variety of projects for the quote unquote public welfare and security of the United States of America.
Okay, but I thought it was funny because I felt like it was a little bit of a little witty twist because like Steve Martin's character, he gets out the map.
Yes.
Like an actual map.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about Rand, and I was like,
Rand McNally.
I just thought it was a little funny.
That is funny. That is
adjacent joke.
Oh, see? And I didn't even get that. And that's why we watch it together so that we can enjoy it.
It was punny.
Then there's the Milton and Miriam Swan Foundation for the Arts and Dissolving the Federal Reserve.
Just
fictional and funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trader Joe's, which is, of course, funny. Real and a total get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Royal Crown Cruises. Oh, it sounds real, but it's not.
But it's not.
I went looking. I'm like, oh, sure, Royal Crown Cruises is real. No, it's not. There's Teeming River Cruises, which has a river cruise called the Royal Crown.
Well, there you go. Okay.
But it's not Royal Crown Cruises. There's the Royal Crown Prince of Dubai.
Yeah.
Which my youngest was looking at my notes this morning as I was finishing up before. And I had Royal Crown Prince of Dubai, real but why? And that kid just thought that was the funniest thing. Because there is a real
Crown Prince
of Dubai.
Yep.
Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum is him. I don't know why he would sponsor a podcast.
I don't know. I don't know anything about him.
Oh, he's adorable, and he just had twins.
Oh,
he's a get, I think.
Yeah.
I think as a podcast sponsor and probably a spouse. I don't know. Well, at least looks and money wise, he's a get. I don't know anything about him.
I mean,
I think he's an Instagram star, but I'm not sure.
For sure, rich.
But, yeah.
You know.
So Charles, when faced with the investigation with Mabel or going to an audition, he decides he's offer only.
Yes, he's offer only. I love that moment. And I was like, you're right, man. You are offer only.
I'm like, you have hardly worked. You had 8 years on Brazos and you've hardly worked anything else. You are not offer only.
He's not, but you know what? You own it. You own it. You do your thing. It's all right.
Really, I think it speaks to his own insecurity. He didn't think he was going to get that job, but offer only is a real thing where they just say, I'm not going to work unless you offer me the job without having to audition for it.
Right.
And generally, there are very few actors who are actually this way because they understand that even if it's not technically an audition, they need to go in and do like chemistry screen tests with people. Even if it's not their audition, maybe their part's secure, but they need to go and do stuff with other actors to help them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's probably different ways to take that. I mean, sometimes an offer only can really just mean like, yeah, literally give me the job and I do want to do nothing. But I think any actor worth their salt, even if they're kind of offer only, like I'm not going on auditions anymore.
Right.
I'm waiting for projects to come to me.
Yeah.
But from there,
yeah,
they might do screen tests. They might, see if they're the right fit for it.
Yeah.
Most actors are, because they care about whether they're the right fit or not, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes you just don't know right off.
Right. Well, and you know what an actor wants to do and what an actor is good at doing or right for the part, maybe two very different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if they're looking to expand.
Yeah.
They're looking to do something new. It has to be the right project for them to expand into.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of considerations for especially a big actor who is well known. Sometimes that can be the very obstacle you have to overcome.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then, of course, the Hardy Boys.
Oh, that was so sweet.
A real book series, of course. The characters were created by American writer Edward Stratmeyer. And the books themselves are typically written by ghostwriters under the name Franklin W. Dixon. And Leslie McFarlane wrote many of them in the early days of the Hardy Boys. So they have been updated.
Oh, yeah?
Many of them. Ooh, because they were pretty extensively revised to remove depictions of racial stereotypes.
Oh, yeah.
For things that written, in the 1950s, 1960s. I can see that being necessary. So they notice that Tim Kono is carrying a trash bag when he's in the elevator.
Yeah.
And they find that weird.
That is weird.
Because there are trash chutes on every floor.
Yeah.
And I was like, how common is that? Because it seems to me like you might have a trash chute on every other floor. you might only have to go down or up a level to get rid of your trash. But no. Evidently, that's quite a thing.
Yeah, I would think it was a thing.
A trash chute on every floor. If there's more than 9 apartments in a building, that they have to have a trash chute on every floor.
Okay, that makes sense.
I was like, that makes total sense. And they have to be like, they have to seal. Yeah. Which I was like, well, that makes sense because you don't want odors and stuff, but that's not the reason why they seal.
I'm sure there's other reasons.
Well, and it's not just vermin either.
Okay.
Which I know is probably the one you were thinking of.
That was one of them that I was thinking of.
The other one, and the main reason why they have to seal is for fire. So that fire doesn't blow up the trash chute into people's apartments.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Finally, in this section, I was like, surely you can't hear somebody that clearly through an air duct from one apartment to another in such a nice apartment building, right?
Okay, my guess is yes, you can when it's old like that. That's my guess.
Yes, you're correct.
All right.
Yes, there's somebody on Reddit was asking. They had NYC questions.
Oh.
I live in an old building. There's a vent that runs through the whole building, and my downstairs neighbor can clearly hear my conversations, and I can hear my upstairs neighbor's conversations word for word as if they were in the same room with me. I was like...
There's like no insulation, and they're made of material that bounces sound.
It's a lot of these places don't have individual like temperature control.
Yeah, actually, okay, that was one thing I was going to mention about the price, the condo fee was. I was thinking, well, it probably also includes electricity, and maybe even water because it's easier for the building to be. Yes. To take it in and then disperse it and then bill it separately or average it or do whatever they're going to do.
Right.
And so.
Yeah. I was like, holy moly. So people had suggestions because evidently this neighbor was annoying. And some of them were, helpful. Run a box fan. Be careful about blocking the vent.
Yeah.
Because it can cause issues. So if you're going to have a few people over, maybe you block the vent temporarily while you have your friends over so that the nosy neighbor doesn't hear everything. Then my favorite one, start having conversations they can overhear. Some suggestions: satanic coven sacrifice, dark rituals. The only real limit is your imagination. I was like,
that's so funny.
Yes.
I do wonder if anybody's ever tried anything like putting sound baffling tiles on the back side. Like open the vent, right? And you've got like a metal vent that's in front of you and it's got a wall in the back and then it goes up and then down, right? Like what if you put sound tiles right there so that when the sound hits it,
it doesn't go anywhere.
Bounce down or up, right? So if they would do that at every floor, I do wonder if that would help in those old buildings where they're like legit like tin can telephones.
Yeah.
Just that's it,
yes. Yeah, it's just missing the string.
Yeah. Yeah. Really.
All right, psychology break.
Okay.
All right. So I've got 2 articles. This is interesting. I have more than 2 articles for this whole section, but I have 2 articles that are sort of companions.
Okay. All right.
And they're both from university newspapers.
Okay.
So the first one is that made me realize I don't think maybe a lot of men quite understand women's fascination with true crime.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that.
They don't understand it. And so first of all, this one's from the Daily Free Press, which is part of Boston University.
Okay.
It's an editorial. Popularity of true crime shows how the public is desensitized, not enough sympathy for victims. This was published at the end of September of 2021. And here's what makes me think that it's written by a man. In addition to some of the content. The byline is editors.
Oh, interesting.
Nobody wanted credit for this, but they wanted it published. So, they don't understand comedy true crime. Women are often the target of brutal crimes and thus share a morbid fascination with these crimes as they fear these incidents may happen to them. True.
Okay.
This leads to a vital question of listening to the true crime and having true crime comedy, which is, they're never making fun of the crime. They're never making fun of the victim. They're finding humor in a dark situation.
Right. That's dark
this
comedy.
This is how you deal with this horrible stuff, is you find something funny to lighten it so that it feels like you can shine a light on it.
Right. I mean, that would be a whole genre, and people have done that for, well, since time began.
Yes,
so
exactly.
The fact that it happens in a true crime format or genre is like
normal, natural extension. Mm-hmm. Yes. So this leads to the vital question: is any of this ethical? In short, the answer is no. Okay. And I'm like, okay, a man wrote. I circled it and wrote man.
Oh, look, he's mansplaining.
You're unethical because you're trying to laugh at things or laugh around things that are hard. Okay, if we can't laugh around the hard things, then we don't get to laugh.
Well, okay, so does he have like any sort of argument? I'm saying he because I'm not really sure, but
yeah.
I mean, do they have any kind of argument behind why they come to this conclusion?
And they're not wrong.
Okay.
Okay, but to say that we can't laugh amidst the hard discussions is really negates his valid points.
Okay.
That there is missing white woman syndrome.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know, where it enforces the old white supremacist myth that white women are under attack while simultaneously contributing to the erasure of people of color who are victims of crimes.
Absolutely. I get that.
Absolutely fair. It's not saying that white women being the victims of crime should be ignored, but it tends to gloss over that people of color, particularly women of color, tend to be more often the victims. The podcasts often do not take care to respect the victims and the gravity and tragedies they recount. Comedians bantering over murder is hardly a respectful way to inquire about a tragedy that leads to deeply desensitized understanding of violent crimes. And I'm like, there is your fundamental misunderstanding.
Yeah.
That there in no way are any of these people being disrespectful or laughing at the crimes themselves. But sometimes things are just ridiculous. And if you point out the ridiculousness, you can listen to the story. If it's all hard and awful, people won't listen and they don't get the chance to learn from any of it.
Yeah.
This is a man.
I feel like, okay, maybe they saw or listened to one or two, podcasts that maybe didn't do it well. And maybe that's true. Maybe they heard it and I don't know. But I also do think that you're right. The fact that they can't acknowledge the true crime comedy is a extension of typical dark comedy is exactly what makes it so that I can't listen to the rest of the argument. Because I'm interested. You think it's unethical? I'm ready to hear that argument. But you don't understand why we're doing it, so you're actually fighting the wrong battle. So now it's like, well...
Exactly.
Okay, but...
Exactly. So while the last unnamed authors don't really understand, we have a different university newspaper, the Brown Daily Herald, has Sarah McGrath, class of 24.
Okay.
Has some really astute observations about who is often at the center of these crimes. And because they're not taking the time to belittle an entire genre without really understanding it, it's fine if it's not your thing, but you don't have to crap on it on the newspaper. There is some problematic things. She says, by overrepresenting white victims of crime and underrepresenting cases of domestic abuse, the media distorts the nature of violent crime. According to a 2018 study in the Journal of Radio and Audio, women make up 73% of true crime podcast listeners. Compared to their male counterparts, female listeners report tuning in more for three salient reasons: social interaction with other listeners, escape, and voyeurism. So social interaction is crucial. And, if your social interaction is hard, you're not going to do it. And that violence against women is really ubiquitous.
It is.
It's something that we can bond over. If we are just sad and angry about it all the time, then nothing's going to get accomplished.
That's right.
There's no way to change it. She goes on to say, serial killers are actually really pretty rare. and they get a lot of attention because they're interesting and rare and weird, but they feel like a very salient threat when it's covered in the media so heavily. And she's basically kind of saying that rather than talking about that as much, it might be more helpful to talk about intimate partner domestic violence and to shine a light on that so that people don't feel so alone.
I hear her. I don't disagree with the things she said. But I don't know that it's actionable insight. And here's why. Sure, serial killers are by and large a rarity, right? We get that. I don't think that anybody who listens to this podcast stuff doesn't get that. So again, it's kind of one of those, well, that's nice. But also, our podcast really media? I know that media started to take it over. Get out. But that's not, it's entertainment. Is it really media the way that like the media is? I mean, they're using it, the term media as a journalism. These things are not journalism, people.
This is true.
And really, even you should, when you listen to all of us, realize we aren't journalists. We aren't doing that level of due diligence on the reporting. Most of us know. And this is all like very living room talk with probably a lot more in some cases, investigation, but different than like what a journalist would do.
Right.
And so like, I don't think you get to lump us all in as the media.
Well, and that's the whole thing too, is that it's not all the same thing. Whereas the news, you generally know what to expect. Podcasts can be anything. They can be anything. They can be investigative journalism, yes, but they can also be, people playing board games or, people drinking wine and talking about whatever, a particular topic. Or
it could be anything.
Patton Oswalt has one where he and his wife explain their text to one another. Like they live in the same house and spend they're in the same house all the time and they text each other like a ton, and then they have a podcast where they talk about it.
That is so funny.
It's really funny.
I mean, you see what I mean? That's my issue. Is like I think because they're not operationalizing their definitions well enough to actually come out with something that is like actionable about that.
The kids and their editorials.
But they're in college, so they don't get an excuse.
Oh, that's
and
true.
They're on this college newspaper, so they're training to be journalists.
Right.
Do better. Like, if I was grading it, I'd be like, you got issues.
Yeah.
This is not empirical at all. So, you got issues. But the other thing that she mentioned was shining a light on domestic violence.
Yeah.
She's right.
Is this necessarily
I don't know
Do we need to take it to task in this format?
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because it is so ubiquitous that at this point, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that. But I hear what she's saying. We talk about it a lot, though.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
So we do a pretty decent job talking about it.
Yeah. Well,
pat ourselves on the back here.
That's right.
We do.
Exactly.
But she makes a point that's very interesting about that.
Yeah. Ooh, here's one that I hadn't thought about. How true crime entertainment has an effect on the families of victims.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time.com had a whole article about a family, and they had adult child was a victim of a murder, and how that was such an issue, and that the true crime fills the need for more than entertainment by distracting viewers from the chaos outside, particularly during COVID, while providing them a sense of predictability and justice, since most of the shows end with authorities solving the crime. So that makes sense. But then it also goes on to talk about how there's no legal obligation to get permission to talk about any of these crimes, as if they're reported in the press. There's no legal obligation for anybody to get permission from the family. And that this lady had talked about how prior to the murder in her own family, she had watched true crime entertainment shows, and only after it was their kid did they have a problem with it, because it gets talked about in the media. They feel like they're re-traumatized, which I can totally understand and empathize with.
Well, again, media or in a podcast?
Well, it was I Am a Killer, the Netflix show.
Okay.
So the Netflix show, they had contacted the family for a statement, and they said, don't do this. And Netflix was like, if you don't want to give a statement, that's fine, but we're still going to do this.
Yeah, that's a little hard.
Yeah. So that's not really something I had really thought about, which is like sad, but also, I'm sorry this happened to your family, but if we can talk about it and help somebody else, don't you want that?
Yeah. I guess legally they do have some recourse in that if they were to say something incorrect, if they were to slander the family,
right,
they could. But then that puts the onus on the family,
right,
to prove the issue rather than having been sought. But yeah, that it is public information.
Right.
I mean,
well, and they had talked to the murderer. I am a killer.
Yeah, it does that.
And they complained that they made it seem too sympathetic, that this person, the actual perpetrator, had a little too much sympathy. And I'm like, well, perhaps if you had talked to them, you could have provided the other side of that.
That's
now,
true.
I get it. Maybe they don't want to talk, and that's also fine.
Yeah.
But
ooh, that's
it's
sticky.
really sticky, and I'm just not quite sure how I feel about that. But I do have a lot of sympathy.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's a therapy situation for the family.
Yeah.
Which sucks because then they got to pay for therapy for something somebody else is doing. But
frankly, they should have been in therapy anyway.
Well, I was just going to say, but that speaks to the idea that perhaps they needed help that they weren't already getting.
Right. I mean, absolutely. You go through
Right.
something like that and yeah.
Maybe
That is an interesting concept.
Maybe Netflix could have helped them out with that.
Maybe so.
We'll provide you with, so many sessions of therapy.
It is interesting because I think you have to have permission to do other people's stories. You can't just make a documentary about somebody without their permission.
Well, but it's not really a documentary about the victim. It's a documentary about the murderer. And they have her permission. And they're not paying her.
Right. So that's how they get around it. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. But it's not a story about one person. It's a story about a situation.
Right.
And in that case, I think all involved have to give permission. That's interesting. Okay.
Actually, they don't because they did it. And
well, no, I'm just saying
they should.
They should.
Right.
They should. I think if the story is actually about a situation, then it's not really a documentary about a person.
Right. Interesting.
Interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. And then finally, secrets are exhausting. All of these people are carrying secrets in the show. Who is this bastard? Why are they lying to me? But they're a universal human phenomenon. Yep. This is from the American Psychological Association. And that they identified 38 common categories of secrets that people keep. And they, from infidelity or illegal behavior to even sort of
benign things
like a secret that you're keeping from somebody because it's a surprise for them.
Oh, yeah.
All of these secrets, this withholding the information is really the crux of it. Now, 97% of people have a secret, at least one secret in one of these 38 categories.
Okay.
Everybody's got a secret.
Everybody's got something.
And most people have an average of secrets in 13 different categories.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting. But it's really hard because you think about it a lot. The more you think about it, the harder it is to keep the secret, the more mental energy that it takes, and that it really is just exhausting.
Yeah.
To keep your secret.
Especially if it requires lies.
Yes. Even just being in the presence of somebody that you're not supposed to tell something to. Mm-hmm. So
can heighten the stress.
Yes. That even if you're not actively lying to them, if you're in the same room as somebody you're supposed to be keeping a secret from, you're thinking about that secret.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if they talk about it, but I have read where they kind of separate secrets as in and maybe this is one of the categories is personal information versus I'm literally keeping a secret
from
you. Right. There's some things that are just personal. People don't share them. It's a secret because they won't tell anybody about it.
Right.
But it's not as exhausting because it's not something that is a betrayal, but it's just not something they're going to share.
Right.
So unless that thing becomes then like you're not talking about a problem and it becomes overwhelming. But in general, like, okay, well, but there's a difference between that and like, you know, another secret, which might be like, ooh, I can't tell them.
Right.
You know.
Yes, and those are the ones that are exhausting.
Yeah.
And they kind of talk about that a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sharing the secret can lighten your load. So if you're feeling burdened, find a person or a place to share that information.
Yeah.
Anonymously, if you need to. Reddit is really good for that. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. All right, real life.
Okay.
So a decades-long downward trend in homicide is over, and it has been for a while.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. So it had been falling since like 1991, like pretty dramatically. The Washington Post has an article about this from July of 2021, that in America's largest cities, and in particular the most economically disadvantaged neighborhoods within those cities, the rise in violence has been pronounced. And there's a lot of speculation about why that it started to rise again in 2014, and the rate increased from 2014 to 2019 by 13% after a really long decline. So now it's nowhere near it was at the 1991 level.
Okay.
But it's headed in a more violent trend, unfortunately.
Again, we've seen that here in our own town.
Yes, unfortunately. And I think the bigger the city, the more of an issue it's been, but they're trying to explain it, and they're trying to understand whether it was economic hardship or social disruptions or uncertainty caused by the pandemic. Is that why there's been this sharp increase? But that doesn't exactly explain it, because lethal violence is largely driven by the actions of a small number of men who are only tenuously tied to formal labor markets and not immediately affected by job cutbacks. So, yeah, the economic stuff can cause some of it, but a lot of the issue does not have to do with, since they're so tenuously tied to the labor market, it's not just about this desperation.
Right.
It's about really something fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, something definitely deeper.
Within those individuals. Yeah. More people are carrying guns, and that seems to be a big thing, because when people have uncertainty, they're more likely to not only go out and buy a gun, but they're more likely to carry their weapon with them, which can cause an issue. And that maybe explains why it's pretty uniquely American, because other countries that have been affected by the coronavirus, especially have, because it's been a little more pronounced in the past year that we've seen this, have not had this lethal rise in crime. Yeah. Because fewer people have guns.
Yeah.
It may have a little bit to do with the civil unrest, particularly around George Floyd in June of 2020. There was a lot of unrest that way, but it really seemed to not be so much as protest cause violent is really too simple. Yeah. It's difficult to reject the hypothesis that less inspired policing, whether promoted by public health concerns, reduced output from dedicated anti-crime units, or lower morale after summer protests, may have played a role. So it's not just protests cause crime or protests cause lethal violence.
Right.
it's a little, that's too simple.
Yeah, it's mediated by the response of the law enforcement to civil unrest and how they respond or back off or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, the evidence doesn't paint a simple picture of why homicide rates surged in 2020. So, and basically they kind of said it'll be years before we really
have the data.
Have the data to really kind of understand what's going on. But, that's tough. But Charles had a catchphrase.
Yeah.
From his popular role as Brazos, this sends the investigation in a whole new direction.
I love it.
It was so funny. So I thought, what are some other fictional detective quotes?
Oh, yes. Oh,
I've just a few.
Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts.
So Hercule Poirot, who is he wasn't invented, he was created. He's not a robot. He's a detective in a crime novel. He's an Agatha Christie creation, says, I do not approve of murder. I'm like, okay, well, that's excellent. And then Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, had a couple that are pretty fun and well known. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
That's a good one.
And then, of course, Elementary, my dear Watson.
Elementary, yes. That's the one I think everybody really knows.
Yeah, I think so. So Charles said that cities are safer because there isn't much outdoor space to bury bodies behind a 14-foot high or 14-floor high-rise. A 14-foot high-rise. That's not a high-rise. A 14-floor high-rise apartment building. But there are a lot of hidden graves in New York City.
I was about to say, actually, New York City has a decent amount of green space, y'all.
It has a lot of green space, but there's also cemetery spaces at a premium. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of green space, but it's pretty well trafficked green space.
Oh, yeah.
So it's harder to bury a body than in the boondocks.
It'd be far easier to hide somebody in a wall.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, there's been no new cemeteries in Manhattan since like the mid 1800s. Mm-hmm. And they're really difficult to get into. But there's a lot of graves.
That's so interesting.
Kind of hidden. So many New Yorkers are aware that Washington Square was originally a potter's field, but few realize that some 20,000 bodies remain underneath the park, some of which were recently encountered when digging for utility repairs that took place.
Whoops.
This is in 6squarefoot.com. And again, J.J. Walker Park. Then there was a Lutheran cemetery that speaks to how quickly things changed in Manhattan. That the cemetery opened in 1809, it closed in 1846, and then it was sold in 1869.
Oh, wow.
So it's like super, super quick change. And that 1,500 people still remained buried there. And then there was a cemetery attached to a church, Trinity. That cemetery was acquired, and they tried for a long time in the 1890s to not have the acquisition go through.
Okay.
They fought for 5 years and ultimately lost. And they, oh geez. There were about 10,000 bodies buried there.
Okay.
And so when Trinity lost, they were salty about it and said, we're not reinterring the bodies.
Okay.
That you bought it.
You deal with it.
You get to deal with it. And so they gave families of people buried in that location a year to move their relatives out of that area. Only 250 bodies were claimed and moved. And so there's still 10,000 bodies just underneath whatever's there now. It's just, I couldn't believe how.
That's so interesting. I mean, I think if I were to be buried in a city, especially, but like I think it would be far more cool for people to come visit me because there's some thing there.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, that's kind of more like, hey, now I'm part of this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. For me personally.
Right.
But, you know.
Oh, don't bury me anywhere.
No, I want to be cremated for sure.
Yeah, me too.
It's funny because Ken's Basic series, you know, the little docuseries on basic
Which
training.
Which is great. I'll share a link to it.
Fantastic, y'all.
Because it's so good. It made me
really
realize that the military was not the right choice for me. So I'm glad I didn't go that way. Yes. Anyway, Basic.
So one of the airmen, when they're doing a little bit of filming before he leaves for basic training, he's like musing about like, why do we bury people laying down? We should bury them standing up.
Oh, yeah.
It makes so much more room. I mean, you know, and then for religious people, they're like ready to go when Jesus comes back. It's my favorite line in the whole daggum thing so far, and it's just so funny. And I just thought it was hilarious. But yeah, he's not wrong. It would be easier. You know, or, you know, if you live in New Orleans, but they have the benefit of heat.
Right.
For that situation.
Yes.
If you haven't, go tour the cemeteries in New Orleans if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Yeah. You can go tour.
So, Tim Kono had his packages misdelivered on a regular basis. Oh, evidently, according to Medium.com and Carolyn Chen, this is common.
Okay.
Really, really common.
I guess I'm not totally surprised by that.
Well, let's talk about how many packages are delivered in New York City every day.
I can't even imagine that number.
1.5 million.
Okay.
About. And of that 1.5 million, about 90,000 packages disappear without explanation each day.
Wow.
Mainly because of either theft or misdelivery.
Okay.
So somewhere between 2 and 10% of packages go missing because they're stolen when they're unattended after delivery, which makes sense. And about 5% are delivered to the wrong place.
Wow.
Which seems like a lot. And they said it's because apartment buildings weren't designed to receive packages.
Yeah.
That, you know, if some of them have doormen, some of them don't. With that many packages that are getting delivered, even if they have a doorman, it can be easy for them to misdeliver because they've got so many packages they're trying to deliver that mistakes happen. But it just seems like 10 to 15% seems like a lot.
It does, but, you know, apartment numbers are kind of harder. Sometimes their apartments don't make sense.
Well, and they'll have the same number building of east and west.
Right, exactly. So
it's the street, same number. The only difference is east and west.
Yeah, that makes it hard.
Yeah, it does make it hard, but I think it's partly overworked delivery people.
That's true too.
It's partly somebody not. They say it costs a lot of money, a substantial amount of money to replace these lost and stolen packages. Mm-hmm. But it seems like if it costs that much money, it must cost less to replace the lost or stolen packages than it is to invest in better structural delivery systems. Because it seems like, okay, maybe we need to take a little more time to or have more people delivering or, you know, have more people working the logistics to make sure that they're stacked in the delivery vehicle the right way so that you're less likely to have issues.
Something. Yeah. It does feel like they have something they can do, but
I was shocked that it was that much.
I guess I'm not surprised.
You really?
I'm really not surprised. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe it's because I can get lost in an apartment building so easily. I can't even imagine. Yeah. Like dealing with that, you know, how just so many and you know, and then if you drop off at a building and the building has to sort it. Right. You know, then that's like another failure point.
Another layer, which is what happened in Only Murders in the Building is that, you know, it came to the right place, but it got delivered to the wrong neighbor.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I could just see that happening all the time.
Yeah. But next time, a super fun thing, Home Alone.
It's so fun.
I mean, it's a crimey, and you don't even really, I mean, you think of it as crimey, but not really. It's more like madcap, and you don't really, but there's crimey things.
But it's crimey.
Like they leave their kid, and they realize it and don't call buddy, really? Like, they call people, but not like the police.
I know. Right? Like, why not call the police?
Yeah. We left our kid.
Maybe that's why. Who wants to make that phone call?
Nobody wants to make that phone call, that's for sure.
No, because then she's getting arrested. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a whole fun madcap sort of story that's full of crime and lots of laughs and perfect for Christmas.
Totally classic.
Yep, absolutely. And don't forget, hometown crimes, whatever they may be, deadline December 9th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Email us, killerfunpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, da, da.